Hello and welcome to the Bee Formless as Flow-Driven CEO podcast. I won't say this morning, I've been saying that, Sean, but it is probably this afternoon in Canada for you. But I am welcoming Sean Languedoc. Have I got that right, Sean? I should have asked that
It's
pre.
okay. Sean's just good. It's French, the last name. It's hard to pronounce,
How do you say that
especially
though? How
for
do how do you pronounce that, your surname?
Languedoc. It's means the language of yes, which is good for me because I'm a salesperson kind of guy.
Yeah,
So,
I love that. Anyway, welcome,
yeah.
Sean. Welcome to my show. Susan, season.
Thanks, B.
Oh, thank you. Seasoned entrepreneur and founder and CEO of Outforce.ai. Oh my gosh, there is so much to talk about with you this morning, and I don't want to steal all your thunder, but you've had quite the success with, all your experience. And I'd love you just to kind of give us a bit of a backstory of your journey, what you're obviously doing now with Outforce.ai, and yeah, over to you.
There's no way I could capture that in the time we have. It's been a long journey and success and lots of failures. Even my profile says I've had four companies before this one. And I'm from Canada, so they all went south. Two of them went to the United States. Two of them obviously didn't do too well. So you get an idea.
Mm,
As we were saying before the show, the adversity is what teaches you the lessons more than the
mm,
success.
mm.
So people go on shows, they talk a lot about all the successful things that happen, but really at the crux of it, it's those pivots, it's those decisions that you make in adversity that really drive what leads to success and
Yeah,
how you manage that as well, right?
yeah, how you manage it.
So, yeah, I mean, I've been in media technologies, I've been in advanced material science using quantum physics,
Uh,
I've been in uh, the petroleum and the logistics, and I built a company called Payload, which is basically Uber meets oil field trucking. And then I got into people moving across borders with high-end engineering, mostly based on immigration challenges in the United States that were less challenging to get people into Canada. And then that ended up with Outforce AI, which is really ultimately in every company I've sometimes outsourced engineering or data science, as the case may be. And it was the opposite problem of hiring. When you're hiring, it's slow. You really want good people to come in. Good people are always employed, so you got to pull them away. It takes a long time to build a team. Sometimes you need a team to do something very specific for a short period of time. And so you look askance and instead of hiring. And as I said, it's the opposite problem. There's thousands, literally hundreds of thousands of options, 20 of which are hitting your inbox every day. And you don't know what's real and what's not. So I decided to build a database on who's good at what in what domain
mm,
as a starting point and use some tricks and new technologies to figure out the best matches for our clients so they don't waste time talking to agencies that are a waste of time. And the key is a combination of AI and real drill down on due diligence with human to human
mm,
because it's always about matching not just the tech stack and the domain, but also the people who are actually going to do the work
mm,
to the engineering team that's going to work with them.
mm.
And that's critical.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you've connected AI and HI. You hear that human intelligence piece, but it's more than just human intelligence, isn't it? It's like that chemistry like we were talking about earlier. How do you
Totally.
how do you connect chemistry? It's kind of like yeah, I used to call it speed dating. I used to get when we were working on pictures and things like that, it was always like, how do you connect the people? Because if you don't have a connected group of people, doesn't matter what the product is or what the service is you're offering, you're not going to get a great result if you've got the wrong chemistry surrounded or you're not matching the right people to the role or the project. So how do you how
Yeah.
how do you tap into that? How do you do the matchmaking component? How do you do the human to human piece?
Well, table stakes are, an agency, like when you're looking for an outsourcing agency, people make a lot of mistakes just in the beginning of the process that results in disaster at the end of the process. And most of those outsourcing jobs don't work out as well as anyone had hoped because of those problems.
Mm,
As an example, if you are a Kansas City organization and you're used to hiring people from the Midwest in the United States, you're going to want people who are really meeting you culturally. And if you go, you say, oh, I hear it's really lower cost in Southeast Asia, and you go to Southeast Asia, um, you're dealing with a totally different hierarchical society that
Yeah.
is not like the sort of robust talk, talk from the heart, US kind of or Canadian methodology. So you have this gap and you have these meetings and they say yes to everything you want to do. And then they don't do what you want to do. And you're wondering why they didn't do it. Well, they didn't want to question you because that's the hierarchical nature of their society. So it's not just chemistry, it's cultural distance,
Yeah.
let alone language distance. So those are the things we factor in. And another mistake people make is they only speak to the leadership of those engineering companies who talk to people like you every day, so they know exactly what to say to make it sound like they're going to be the perfect company.
Mm.
And then you have no idea who you're going to get to the last minute, or they bait and switch. They present you people who might be sound great, but they're not available when you suddenly sign off on the contract. So we avoid all those pitfalls with our process of both the data-driven algorithm and the quick due diligence, asking key questions to figure out what is really going on in the
Yeah.
organization and the people that are running.
Fascinating. I want to take a step
Mm.
back, and I
Mm.
want to come back to what we're talking about now. But you talked about failure, and adversity.
About
Failure. Um,
failure. Okay, so
yeah, that's okay. It's probably my Aussie accent. I'm quite.
yeah, I should be used to it because I lived in Whistler too. So it's like
Well, yeah, we've got that in common living in Whistler, right?
Aussie Day, the day after Aussie Day, the whole resort would shut down because nobody's working.
Yeah, that's right. Australia Day, yes. Oh my gosh, I remember. Yeah, we could talk about Whistler for days, but yeah, there was always like it was like when I first went there, there was like there were Aussies everywhere. I was like, where are all the Canadians? Like we had over.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, I will slow my language down, but adversity and failure.
Mm.
And she talked about you'd had, four businesses, obviously seasoned entrepreneur, probably way more than four. But you said you learn more from adversity and failure than you do from all the successes.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, I'm going to ask you about that, but how did this adversity failure get you to where you are now with Outforce? Because you're clearly on a real trajectory when it comes to success, like, with regards to it's resulting in like a 98% success rate in technical placement, your current company. What are the learnings?
Hmm.
Like, what are some of the learnings that helped you then, kind of almost, you can never future-proof anything perfectly, right? Because you just never know what's going to happen. But yeah, can you
Right.
talk a little bit about that from an adversity and the failures you've had? Because we don't talk about those. But yet they bring so
Yeah.
much
Well,
to what we do next.
some people think of associate failure with shame. And the nice thing about the tech boom is it converted the word failure to pivot. Pivot means that either you pivoted to closing the business or you pivoted to another business because your first idea wasn't going to work. And that happens more than ever. And the good news about technology businesses is it got easier to pivot because things went to the cloud, all kinds of other things became infrastructurally and cost effective to do these kinds of things. And now more than ever, right? So, I mean, where do I start? So many failures on the way to some successes. One, I'd say, well, you come from the media side of the business, agency
Mm,
side of the business. So, um, one of the first ideas I had was, intellectually, it was bang on. I had sold sponsorships to major corporations around the world to help support Vancouver's Olympic bid. And so I knew the CMOs, the chief marketing officers, and I'd seen how technology, the internet, basically at that time, it was sort of the turn of the 2000, had transformed a lot of businesses. Like stock market had been transformed by E-Trade. The end user got access to data that was otherwise in the hands of an agent, and so transaction costs went way down, and people started to trade on their own. Same thing in travel industry. You used to use a travel agent to go book your hotel, your airline, everything, because they were the only ones who had access to Gemini, which was their central reservation systems that everyone used. So they were paid, each of these agents were paid about 15% of the transaction value. Well, ripe for change was the media buying industry, where you have all these creative agencies like you probably had of your own, and then they would centralize that into a media buying agency
Yeah.
and leverage that volume to make better buys. But they were receiving faxes from the media companies as to what was available, and then they were re-entering that into Donovan data systems, and then sending back what their optimized buy was going to be. And during that transaction, half the media was already sold, so they were out of sync. And basically, sorry, that got to the end picture. My idea was to actually bring everything online and everything in real time. Now, everybody I talked to thought it was a great idea. And so my ego was like, oh, right, we're going to make billions on this sucker
They love an ego.
and transfer the whole transition, the whole industry. And being from Canada, I thought, okay, let's start it in Canada, go to the United States. So I raised a little bit of money and started to go at it. And somebody told me it was the stupidest idea they ever heard. And this person was the chief marketing officer of a major corporation. I said, wait a minute, everyone else says it's smart. You're saying something different. And if I was in the wrong position, I would have said, you're stupid and everyone else is smart, and I'm still going. But one of the things that Peter Thiel always liked to say, who's a fantastic investor, is what do you believe in that nobody believes in, that you feel convicted to, and what's that going to change? How is that going to change the future? And he said, basically, look, I'm the chief marketing officer. I don't make a lot of errors in my decisions, and I'm protected from errors by hiring agencies. You're telling me to hire a bunch of warm bodies to do the media buying. If my campaign fails, I get fired, not the agency, because it's all in my control. I like that barrier. And so culturally, the industry would never have accepted what I was going to do at
Mm.
the buy side, at the buy side. And on the sell side, their businesses, they're salespeople. They want to go talk to agents. They want to blah blah blah.
Yeah.
So what I ended up doing was, and that pivoted me from that idea, which was very grandiose, to one where I was just moving data between the two systems, which I said, which is a very kludgy, terrible old way of doing things. Built a Rosetta Stone that translated data so that they wouldn't have to translate that data. They'd have real-time information, still use the old systems. And my pitch was, hey, we're not disrupting anything. We're just bringing back the three martini lunch because you're not doing wasting all this time with data reentry. So
You know about those
that was a
lunches.
pivot,
You know about those
but it
lunches.
would have been a massive failure if I had not
Yeah.
figured that out, right?
Yeah, I like that.
So
I like the pivot, but I also like the fact that you pivoted, but you also simplified. Like, because quite often our ego gets so grandiose, it gets big, the idea becomes bigger and bigger and bigger than Ben-Hur. And yeah, it's not necessarily what the market needs, or that we get so attached to ego, um,
right.
that it kind of almost it literally takes over. So
Totally.
I
And we
love.
do that. Like as
Mhm.
entrepreneurs, we go out, we raise money, we tell people we're going to do something, and then we do something different. How does that sync with the people who gave you the money and all the stories and belief they had in you to do that thing? Well, the truth is, if you're honest with them, they'll appreciate that they're not going to waste their money on something that's not going to work, right?
Yeah.
And that's what happened. So I mean, this last company, it started on the side of my desk with something completely different. I really started off bringing people in from the United States whose visas were expiring under the previous Trump administration, and hiring them in Canada and contracting them back to the United States, because Canada had a really good visa program for tech workers. And that grew into an international recruiting agency for Canadian companies who didn't have enough good engineers, senior engineers. We're a small country, lots of tech, not enough people to do it. So it made a lot of sense, and it was growing the Canadian tech ecosystem. That was growing great. And all of a sudden, this little disease came across, this little thing called the coronavirus, which totally changed everything,
Well,
and nobody was going anywhere. So I couldn't do it anymore. So here's the lesson I learned from that is you don't, and what a lot of people do is they sort of shit on themselves for having failed, and that ended the business like overnight. There was no way I was going to be able to continue that business. But what I did have were people in a whole bunch of other countries who knew a lot about tech, who knew a lot about what was going on in those countries. And what I did have was a shift in mindset
Mm.
that remote was now okay. So I didn't need to bring people to Canada anymore. I could and it solved a problem that I had before, which was I used those people to figure out who's good at what in their country and build a database around boutique firms that were really good at very specific things instead of like they all say on their websites, we can do everything under the sun in every tech. The truth is very different from that.
Yeah.
So the key to the fail is not what you got, the learning is what you got wrong. But what you take to the what you want to change to is everything that you learned along the way. So, that's that you're never not learning,
No, I
and
agree.
you're bringing way more assets to the next level.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And that for me is that shaping and reshaping. It's that continuous shaping, reshaping, and nothing's linear. And so, like your whole point around pivoting, I think it's nice to be able to say, like, yeah, it didn't work or it failed because fail does equal shame, and there's no need to have shame attached to failure because like you say you're always learning, right? So but we've put such a dirty word, it's such a dirty word in society, failure, really. But
Yeah. But
that is where
yeah,
your mindset shifts, that is where your grit and your resilience kicks in, and you're like, okay, well, what am I learning from this? And what do I do now? And how do I pivot? Because you have a choice. You have a choice that you can fall into that victim mindset, woe me, why me, and then almost become frozen and stuck. That procrastination kicks on in, or you can go, well, that didn't work, but here's the opportunity here. So I'm going to pivot and do it this way. I think that is a huge mindset piece that like it really takes. I don't know. It takes courage for me and being brave to be able to just go, that's not working and that's not working. I'm going to have to shift something. And what am I going to shift? And if we go back to ego, it's almost like you have to drop your ego at that point. You have to kind of go, okay, ego, go away. I've actually got to dig in here and understand what and now how where I take this. What's your view
yeah.
on that?
Well, there's persistence in not listening and running your head against the wall all the time.
Mm.
That is not a good idea. So persistence is definitely something I know that I have and can be a dangerous asset, which you have to be self-aware enough to know when you really are running up against a wall.
Yeah.
And then there's a great line that I learned as a young entrepreneur. Um, it was problems are not stop signs, they're guidelines,
Yeah. Well, I like that.
which is a nice and elegant way of putting it. And so it's really what is going right, what is going wrong, and not just one data point, but many data points to make sure that that is the right decision. I mean, in our case, most of the investors in my company probably just assumed we're out of business and it's done, like spray and pray money gone. And fortunately, we had enough in our in our basket that we could continue and work out. And we tried 4 or 5 different things, by the way. It's not like that was the thing and we went all in. We tried a few other things, and some of them worked moderately well, but this worked really well.
Mm.
And and I know the problem because I've had it my own, outs like just inundated with stupid ideas about outsourcing or inundated with people trying to hit me to get their outsourcing job from us and just not believing any of it. It's just white noise. So having someone to guide you through that is phenomenal. And where we're going with it is even more, self running. Like I equate ourselves today to a travel agency. We have all the data, we know where you should go. based on that data. We do the due diligence. We call the hotels. We're like the travel agent. We're going to call and make sure they've got the right room. We're going to do all that stuff like they did in the old days. Well, now we're going to give enough bumpers in the process of that due diligence process that the client can probably do it on their own and will become more like Expedia compared to an agency.
Yeah, that's
That's where we're
cool.
going.
But I also think that's around having a relationship, right? That's a relational way of operating in business, if you ask me. Like, when you talk about,
How do you mean?
well, I just think with the bumpers and everything you're talking about, like you're checking everything. It's like when you compare it to a travel agent, like,
Hmm.
you can be super transactional and kind of go, all right, project, got the project, and then kind of have no real relationship with your client. Or you
Right.
can have that relationship where there's an element, well, you care about the result, you care about that they're getting the best service. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I still
Yeah.
think that's super important, especially in a world where AI is coming at us so fast. And there
Hmm.
probably is this concern out there that, am I just going to be talking to a machine going forward, sort of thing, or, some agent or whatever. But, what I'm hearing from you is there's definitely still this human aspect to everything you're doing, and there needs to be because
100%.
the AI can't do, the agent can't do everything. And we're kidding ourselves
Well,
when
AI could theoretically do everything, but uh, can it do it as well? I mean, it can do a lot to get you to the final. And then the final really, I mean, one of the other classic lines I learned from my one of my first businesses, which, you know, you, like, for example, that media business, which was called IT Media, where we were bringing all this data into a data set and then pushing it back out. Um, there were some companies that didn't want it because they didn't want people to lose their jobs. It was, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation back in the day, so I could say it now, so many years ago. But they didn't want they're highly unionized, didn't want anyone to lose their job, and they didn't want anything of it. And one of my investors said, "Yeah, business would be so easy if people weren't involved." Because there's this human, there are
tension.
so many forces going on in what a human wants to do or doesn't want to do.
Yeah.
And so the same thing with interviewing. I just had a meeting with somebody who who does a lot of HR work and uses does a lot of recruiting. And she said, "Yeah, we just had a call, and I think that the person was talking to a bot. Like, I really think I was talking to a bot, and in the recruiting process. So the bot was doing the interview. Now imagine if the bot is interviewing the bot for the interview. What decisions do you make? And the reason the bot was doing the interview was because they wanted to make sure they had all the right answers to the question, right? So
How did they know? How did they know they felt like they were talking to a bot?
because you can replicate your voice, there's
Yeah.
bots that will, just take small motions out of your mouth and replicate it to voice. It's quite easy to do now. So it really becomes, how do you judge? And just for your audience benefit, I said, well, we used to do that when we were doing international recruiting, make sure that it wasn't a bot, it was, the brother of the person or whatever. We have them show them their ID on screen, and we made sure that that matched the face and the person that we're talking to, preferably a passport because we needed to have them show a passport. So, a bot can't do that, right?
No,
So
that's
those kinds of things you can get away with, or the secret words, the story of grandparents being, solicited for money based on the kid having an accent, needs the money, blah blah blah, and it's just a bot replicating the kid's voice. You have to have these secret words, right? So it's
wow.
amazing what we're doing.
Yeah, it is amazing what we're doing. How did you get into AI? Like, have you always been like, you've obviously been an entrepreneur. Have you been an entrepreneur all your life? Like, all your, like, from, a young age, or
No, no. The person that got me there, I was going to do my MBA, and I just spent a winter skiing in Europe as bumming it basically, and I was
that's
going
what
to
I
go
did in
sail a
Whistler.
boat. Yeah, exactly. I
My
did the same
parents
thing in
think I
Europe,
worked. I did.
and then I was going to sail across the Atlantic, and I couldn't get a boat to go across because they were all coming from the Caribbean back to the Mediterranean. So I was sort of thumbing around, and I at a coffee shop near Antibes, which is southern France. And this American hears me speaking. He says, "Oh, you must be American." I go, "No, I'm Canadian." And he says, "What are you going to do?" And I told him what I wanted to do. He said, "Why the hell would you want to take an MBA?" I said, "Because I want to learn business." And he said, "How much are you going to spend on the MBA?" I said, "I don't know, between, accommodations and school, 30 grand." And this is back in the day. Today it'd be a lot more. And he said, "Why don't you take half of that, go borrow, beg and borrow for money, and go start your own business?" I said, "Why would I do that?" He said, "Because if you're going to learn more from doing that than you will in any MBA. And if you lose all your money, you've learned way more than anybody else going to come out of the school. And if you make money, it's a double bonus." And that's what turned me into being an entrepreneur.
Wow.
That advice was great
That
advice.
one encounter. And so then
And
how,
that's back in the day when everyone worked for IBM or, went into careers, right?
yeah, fascinating. And then how did you, so then like, so you've always been interested in tech, is that right? And then you got into AI through, like, have you always, yeah, how did you fall into AI then? Like, how did you,
Well, AI is the enabler for what we do. I wouldn't say we are in AI. We're not building large language models. We're not doing anything other than leveraging AI to execute on what the clients need.
okay.
Um, and it enables us to move faster. We have,
Yeah.
with AI, it's all about process before prompt. And we have a really good process, depending on which country you're coming from, that enables us to lever speed to get to the right outcome, which is the right team for the right project
Mm,
at the right time.
yeah. But like from,
But to answer your question about technology, I mean, I came from commercial real estate first, and then I went into actually, I did those first companies way back in the early 90s, actually 80s, um, which were sort of small businesses. And then I went into larger zeros in the business um, with real estate. And then I went into sponsorship. And actually, I was head of sponsorship for IntraWest, which owned Whistler Blackcomb when you were
oh
at
yeah.
the time. I don't know if Whistler had merged by the time you got there, probably, right?
Well,
Yeah.
they had Whistler,
So
the two mountains. They had Whistler and Blackcomb, obviously, and still exist. But
yeah,
yeah, it was Whistler,
yeah,
Blackcomb at that point. Yeah, when I got there. Yeah,
yeah.
back in
So
two.
I always applied sort of entrepreneurialism, even when I worked for somebody else. Like at Whistler Blackcomb, I took the commercial real estate model of recurring revenue from great covenants, which is what the value of commercial real estate is at the end of the day. It's not the land, it's the people paying,
Mm,
the companies that are paying the rent and the term of the lease. And skiing, you can't count on good weather. You can't count on a skier to show up. So I created a sponsorship portfolio of great brands to sponsor the ski experiences, not put signs on the mountain, but to actually create better experiences for the skiers. And that created a recurring revenue portfolio that was worth, a lot of money for IntraWest. So
yeah, it was. Oh,
that
interesting.
was applying
I remember
applying one
interest.
model to another, and
Yeah.
that's basically
Yeah.
entrepreneurialism.
And sorry, I will reframe. What I should have said is with regards to AI, I totally get that that's not what your business is about. But the fact that you've set up your business and AI becomes an enabler, there's still a lot of businesses out there that haven't even adapted AI systems or anything like that, right?
Sure.
And so
Yeah.
for you, you're fully ahead of the game in from a tech perspective and AI perspective in terms of your business. It's like it's obviously backed by and enabled by AI. You must have
Hmm.
seen something early, like in early days when before, anyone was kind of, I guess, even knowing what AI really was, even though it's been around since what, the 1950s or whatever. Like that's what everyone thinks it's a new thing, but actually it's been here for many, many years. The fact
Yeah.
you applied it to your business as kind of like that for me is quite interesting in terms of adapting AI into your business so early.
Yeah, it depends on what you call AI. I mean, some people like a lot of what that algorithm is basically database, matching. It's not rocket science. Where we get into more fancy stuff is when we do these due diligence processes. But so, the data of a company, it has, many data points, median rating, median price point of a intermediate developer, geography, so time zone difference from my client, project experience in the domain, depth of the bench in various tech stacks, so that we know that if we go to them for 3 or 4 people, we could go to them for 10 or 15, or at least three, if 4 or 5, let's say we start with 5 people and one of them in the interview process snuck through, because we do these group interview processes, and is not a really good communicator. It can't handle the criticism, or, something. It's usually something very soft skill oriented, definitely not the technical skill orientation that makes somebody not a good fit. That person needs to be replaced. We know that the company has the bench strength that we can replace him or her with somebody of equal strength. So that's kind of the very basic SQL matching algorithm. But there are other much more softer, much more nuanced perspectives on various ways we interview and various ways we get the results of those interviews that is done with AI that is phenomenal.
Mm,
And we also go right down to the grand level of those individuals that are being proposed by the agency. The agency might be the right fit, but they might not have the right people when you're asking them.
mm,
And to answer your question about AI and how I got it, I mean, I was lucky enough that when I was doing this international recruiting stuff, I got very involved with the three sort of hubs of AI in Canada. One is in Edmonton, Alberta, um, and the other Toronto, and the other in Montreal, where we had these iconic personalities who were leading the AI charge long before it was in mode. And it really just sort of, those people were actually all newcomers to Canada, Washua Benjua in Montreal, Jeffrey Hinton as 2 examples. They came to Canada because the government was smart enough to sponsor their entry and support AI research. Now, PhDs in machine learning and neural networks and all that stuff are not overnight, right? It takes 7 years to get your PhD, another 5 years to do practicums that are significant enough to get you some value. And if you get into the business side of it, you're even better. So that's what I was recruiting into Canada from around the world. So I got to know a lot of people in the space, which gave me a little bit more of an insight as to what's going on. But today it's so user friendly. I mean,
mm.
and then the cost of leveraging a network that somebody else has built and we're running on, like ChatGPT or Claude or Perplexity. I mean, they're just phenomenal,
Yeah.
phenomenal assets for the world.
Yeah, they are actually. They're super phenomenal. And but there is still a lot of people that are no, there's a lot of early adopters and not necessarily a lot of people like adapting it into their business just yet. One last
Yeah.
question, just on team, it's been kind of coming ruminating in my mind. Like as a
Mm.
seasoned, and I've got two questions on teams. Teams in terms of the teams that you seem to form and put together, like, and how you're helping
Hmm.
businesses. But with
Hmm.
your own team, do you have, like, with the businesses the different businesses you've had, have you always had a team around you, the same team around you, or depending on the business, then you have put a different team together? Like, do you, like, obviously entrepreneur, but like, do you have your right hand people that have been on the journey, the long-term journey with you, or how do you connect to your team and like with your team and the team you put around you?
That's a really good question. I'll give you 3 answers to that question.
Mm,
So in the old days, your I mean, I'm a business person, so I would look at technology to solve a business problem as opposed to building a technology and trying to find a business problem, right? So I needed a technology person as my right hand person who I could trust to build the technology. And I would give that person a big chunk of the equity because I would never get anywhere without that
mm,
person. Today, things move so much faster. I would say that is the worst thing you could do because that equity is going to be worth 100 million bucks. And if you spend 100 grand on a team of contractors who know your domain really well,
mm,
who've built hundreds of products in your space, they know the user experience, they know the constraints of the regulation around, say, health tech or fintech, and they can work within those constraints. You can get the fractional use of the UX UI person, the person who designs the product, the architect behind the product, the DevOps, everything about that, and pay way less, give up way less equity, get to where you have a proof of concept, move that product and iterate until you get product market fit, and then hire, you might hire your CTO, but hire or contract on a fractional basis that person until you've got product market fit.
Yeah.
Then you start giving up a little equity and building your own team because now you know what you need
Yeah.
because you know what the fit is. That's the first answer is I would do things very differently today than I did back then.
Yeah.
And then the second answer is the question was, do you bring those teams along with you? Well, the thing I love about how I run these businesses is I really believe in empowering the people that come to it. And some of them are in the ride for a job to move to another job, and we support that. And I really try and look at people and what do you want to learn? What do you want to get out of this? Give me 3 years. What do you want to be in 3 years? And we'll help you get there, either by personal growth or capacity growth. And so what I'm looking for in the hiring process is the agency of the person.
Mm.
How motivated are they? Do they have the resilience? Do they have the persistence? Do they have the creativeness to get things done without necessarily having the capability? And we'll teach the capability along the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when they have both capability and agency, they're a perfect hire for somebody, or they're the perfect keeper, depending on where they want to go and where we are going, right?
Mm.
So that's the second thing. And then what ends up happening is a lot of people start companies because they love how we did this. And I'm teaching them how to be an entrepreneur,
Mm.
what the things you got to learn to be, how you treat with your board, how you treat with your investors, how you treat with your customers, how you hire people, all those things. Um, and so many of my staff have become very successful entrepreneurs because they learned from my mistakes and started their own company. And that's probably the most rewarding thing out of the experience.
Yeah, I think you learn
Yeah.
a lot. I mean, I worked with three entrepreneurs as well, three, owners, and it was effing crazy half the time, but
Yeah. No, it's a shit show all the time.
it's been put me in
It's
good
just a
stead.
question of degree.
Yeah, put me in good stead to start my own company, and that's why I was asking you around the people. And I like, for me, I know this sounds super basic, but in terms of, I always played with fixed and flexed, so I use
Hmm.
that kind
Oh
of
yeah.
fixed. So a fixed, as in, who's your core resource? Like, what core
Hmm.
resource do you need on the books full time? And then what do
Hmm.
you flex in? And like,
Yeah.
in terms of like
Especially in the agency business. Yeah.
100%. But even
Yeah.
today, now, like I kind of look at, even what you're doing, you kind of like go, well, what do I need for my core? And then what do I need to bring in when, we're going through a peak season, if you like, or a peak period. But then how do
Hmm.
I then kind of like pull it back or tone it down? So like you constantly, like yeah, it's a fixed flex model where you've got a community of flex community that you can tap into, but they're not
Yeah.
just always sitting there. Like, and I'm not suggesting that would sit there, but I always played with that fixed and flex. And I still think that stands in good stead for what's ahead and the world we're living in now. And even when you talk about remote and hybrid everything, right? Like
Yeah.
you don't need all the overheads necessarily that we once thought we did need. Mm.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So I call that the lifeboat part. If the ship sank, who do I want on the lifeboat? Because that's what's going to be the core that we take through to the next level. And for me, even the lifeboat personnel changes as the company changes.
Mhm.
So the person who bootstrapped my first technology company is not the person who grows it to the next enterprise level. The person who's really good in a domain, like in the case of hiring, right? We were doing all this recruiting and for companies. Now we're doing nothing but outsourcing. We're helping companies find the right outsourcing agency. Totally different business model.
Yeah.
Had to change the executive team as well, and brought in somebody who's been in that side of the business for
Mm.
25 years, knows it cold, right? So but what is consistent about what I do is I'm all about vision and go get it, get those first deals and the sales to enable the company to grow. I need the yang to my yin. I need someone who's totally operational,
Yep.
detailed oriented,
Yeah.
maniacally detailed oriented.
Yep.
Because, and then a translator, they used to call it translation. So, I have this delta between what I think and what I say. And what I think is what I see in my head, the vision of where it's going to go. What I say is only a fraction of what you need to get there. And so somebody needs to fill those gaps for me because I'm not the person.
Yeah.
And I
No, that makes
acknowledge that. So everywhere I go, I have somebody like that with me.
Yeah, I love that. I love the translator. Some great language here. Well, I feel like we did say before the meeting we could keep talking, and as the morning's getting brighter for me, I kind of feel like my brain's more and more going, oh, I've got all these
Good.
questions I could be asking you. But Sean, last, what would be your final words of wisdom, not final, but just for now, in terms of what advice would you give someone starting their own business today, right now?
Wow. I'd say where it used to be, you would have a moat with technology, the speed with which people can replicate whatever is out there, especially SaaS businesses, etc., point solutions, those are moving too fast. You can be replicated in 2 seconds. So what you need, obviously, you need good engineering and a good product and good user experience. That's table stakes. But more than anything else, the biggest asset where that used to be the engineer is now your go-to-market partner, the person who knows how to infiltrate, break through all the noise, leveraging AI to get to market with your product. That's the differentiator. And speed to market creates customers, and customers creates revenue. Customers and revenue creates traction, creates leadership, creates more money coming into the business. Everything goes from that. So it's turned the 1990s model on its head. Its go-to-market is number one right now.
Yeah, that's exciting. I'm super excited about the future. But yeah, well, thank you, Sean. And how do we find out more about your company, what you're doing?
Yeah. So my company is Outforce.ai, and anybody on the list of employees can be reached at their first name plus Outforce.ai. And for those who are interested in outsourcing, I mean, I gave you some tips. I'm issuing a full, playbook on how to outsource. So whether you use my goal is obviously we want to do business, but we want an outcome for everybody. And that is that nobody wastes time talking to agencies that are a waste of time. So I'm going to be publishing that whole playbook in video and in text format in a series. And so if you send me an email, Sean at outforce.ai, and say, send me the playbook, I'll send you the playbook as soon as it's ready.
I love that. Well, thank you, Sean. Thank you. And you have a
Okay, thank you.
wonderful, what time is it?
Getting close to it's 6 o'clock. Yeah.
6 o'clock or 6 p.m. Well,
Dinner time.
you have a lovely evening, and
Oh,
I'm just
I gotta go play pickleball.
go and enjoy pickleball. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right.
Thank
Take
you.
care. Thank you.
You too.
Bye-bye.